Welcome back to the Highway 49 podcast. We are back with episode 91 of the show. And today we're talking all Hornets. Charlotte 49ers head coaching search is still ongoing. So Jeremy and I are going to dive in and talk about a wild game from LaMelo Ball, from Brandon Miller, another Hornets win at home, and get into a little bit of the NBA discourse. Jeremy's got some things he's got to say, but let's go ahead and get into it, Jay. Last night, OT victory looked like it had a chance to go to double OT there. Um, Charlotte blows a 20-point lead at one point in the game, 14-point lead in the fourth quarter, nearly gives away another close game with a big lead. Would have been their second in a row. But we saw some heroics early in the action from LaMelo Ball, late in the game from Brandon Miller. Jay, just talk us through kind of the roller coaster that was last night, man. It was a wild one.
Yeah, I want to start with I got home after this game, still amped up. Just I feel like I fell in love with the NBA again. Not that I fell out of love with it, but this just reinforced why I love what I do. And not that I root for the Hornets, but I really want to touch on something real quick before we get into the nitty-gritty. The regular season matters for league pass teams, right? You always hear that, oh, well, injuries and the ratings and people don't like the style of basketball, three-point chucking and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, cool. If you want to watch an ESPN, TNT, ABC nationally televised game and Paul George and Embiid are out and they're playing another team and those players are out, like the Nuggets and the Mavs tonight. Jokic is out, personal reasons. Luka's out, wrist injury. Those teams can still afford to lose those games. It's okay. They're going to
Right.
end up in the playoffs. But 70% of the league doesn't experience that. 70% of the league, game in and game out, is a bloodbath. It is one, two, three, four plays that end up being swing plays that lose you a game. If you're mad about where the state of the NBA is, you're not looking hard enough. Get NBA League Pass. Go watch the Jazz and the Grizzlies duke it out in overtime. Go watch the Pistons and the Hornets almost go to double OT. The Pistons are playing well. You have the Hornets with LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller going crazy. Cody Martin shooting 50% from three at home. The basketball's out there. You just got to find it, man. So I want to throw it back to you. Just like, what were some of your initial reactions? Because, like you mentioned at the top, like this game could have went either direction. We said to each other, like, "Hey, deja vu. This is getting kind of getting Brooklyn Nets deja vu," but they were able to pull it out somehow.
Well, and that's the thing. So coming off of the Hornets being in the national news with Charles Lee electing to bench LaMelo Ball for the final 3 minutes and 48 seconds of Tuesday night's game in Brooklyn, you didn't really know what you were going to get in this game, right? Is Melo going to come out firing? Is he going to have an off night? Like, where are you going from this? Because it's not often that a first year head coach makes a decision like this and you see it sort of work out. And Walker Mill, a friend of ours, asked Charles Lee last night, "What has this 48 hours been like for you?" And he talked about kind of the highs and lows of working through it. Melo and Charles had a conversation, and I think you saw. I mean, Melo started the game scoring or assisting on the first 8 points, had 18 at the half. He did pick up three quick fouls, and I want to dive into that in a few minutes. But he reminds you pretty much every time you watch him, he can take over a game with his scoring spurts, and then he really is the driver of this offense. When outside of Brandon and some spots, and I want to get into this too, Charlotte really doesn't have someone that can slow down and get into the offense.
It's I was watching the highlights this morning and seeing Melo's change of pace. It looked like Chino Hills. He's doing like stop motion dribble off it's so herky jerky kind, not even like Brunson. It's his own thing. He's like, I'll show you the clip later. It was insane. But just seeing how his game has changed and evolved and how he can get to, like I said, his base is the same. If he can get to that base, he can shoot from anywhere. He can drive to the basket. He's a much better finisher around the rim. He has a little floater he can give you. We also saw him have a double clutch late in that game to tie the game and put him up two. And I just think that we are seeing LaMelo Ball use what happened in that Nets game as fuel. And I want to go back to what you said because Walker did ask Charles that and Melo. Great questions by Walker last night, where Melo was like, "Hey man, we talked. We're eye to eye now. It's all good." Which
Yep.
lets me know, you know what? People for the last 24 hours, whether it's Jeff Teague or Gilbert Arenas or any national media, Kendrick Perkins, saying like, "Oh my God, Jesus Christ, he benched a star player." No, I think it was necessary. I think that in the long run, it will help this team. And I mean, last night, that was a hell of a game, dude. And seeing how when Melo left, then you had the other guy come in, happy
Yeah,
birthday, B Mill, golden birthday, like he told us in the press conference last night. It's just, it's a, there's a light at the end of the tunnel for Hornets fans, and I think that's the only thing they can ask for right now.
definitely. And that's the first. So Brandon Miller's pours in his career high, 38 points. LaMelo gets 35. That's three shy of his career high. And that's the first duo in Hornets history to both score 35 in a game, which is crazy when you think about some of the duos that they've had and back in the day. And that's the 19th duo to have 30 plus. So interesting stats there. But you're right, man. It was almost like the first quarter was Melo's. He got them going. The fourth quarter was wild. I mean, we were talking pretty much the whole time. It just felt like Detroit was going to come back into this game, come back. They're hunting Melo in these situations. He picks up three early fouls, gets a fourth going into the fourth quarter, and then he picks up this late game offensive foul on an overturned call with about 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. And at that point, in my mind, I'm thinking if he's going to stay in the game, Charlotte has to win in regulation. And we saw almost like a maybe not a frustration foul, but a bad inbounds pass from Brandon Miller to open OT. And that's really how Melo picked up his sixth and final foul, fouling out for the fourth time this season. And this kind of leads me into a point that I want to make really fast. This was, I'd say, far and away Brandon's best game shooting and scoring. He did have 7 turnovers last night, and a few of them were in key spots. And I want to get into a little bit of the inbound situation late because that's something that he struggled with a little bit, and you want to see that improve. What are your thoughts on that specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when he was inbounding, and I told you guys, like, hey, Brandon's had a tough time with these
Yeah,
inbounds, 5 second violations. It's not the first time he's had one this season. Even with the turnovers where he's just dribbling and the ball just kind of he kind of loses just possession of it and the ball just goes out of bounds, where I think that dribble might need to be a little tighter, something he may need to work on, but it's okay when you do what you did in overtime,
yeah,
but that's the thing where I'm just impressed, and I know we're talking through this like just in real time here, but Brandon Miller, it's crazy how I don't think Hornets fans know how to react on a game-to-game basis to things happening. It's because they haven't really experienced a winning team or like a real duo that has promise like Brandon and Melo do. So there's a lot of overreactions. There's a lot of like recency bias going on. Brandon Miller slump who? Sophomore slump where?
yeah,
This guy is one of the best catch and shoot players in the league right now. And I said this at the game. At one of these times in the season, next season in his career, he's going to have a Klay Thompson 60.11 dribble game
yeah,
because he can fill up the stat sheet and not put the ball on the floor. And when you think about it, what's the best guy to put alongside LaMelo Ball? Someone who doesn't need to handle or dominate the ball and can still fill up the stat sheet without doing that. And I mean, when you hear about LaMelo trade rumors or all these things, you're like, are you guys kidding me? Because when you watch the games, there's no way you
yeah.
can still think that.
Well, that's the thing. So last night I pinch hit for Rod Boone in the Observer, and wrote a story about that duo. And one of the things I tried to highlight was their games are complementary to one another. Like LaMelo is the driver. He has of players to play more than 2 games all season. He's got the highest usage rate in the league. It's over 36%. Giannis is right there behind him. So when you think about someone dominating the ball, that's LaMelo Ball. Brandon has the ability to come off these elevator screens, come off these pin downs and curls and get open looks. And you saw, I mean, dude, Grant was playing the Draymond Light role that we talked about. I mean, these picture perfect screens to set up Brandon, to set up Cody Martin, who you mentioned earlier, shooting the ball really well. And this was a point that you made. Their Brandon's breakout and the Melo's consistency and being on the court right now is accelerating the timeline of this group. And I kind of joked with both of them last night. This is one of the better duos Charlotte's had. And this is, you're starting to be able to put these guys on NBA Jam shirt. I thought that was funny. Brandon ate that up. LaMelo, at least he responded. You know what I'm saying? You got about a sentence out of him. But as far as the timeline accelerating, we're seeing Musa Diabate playing a ton of minutes and he's earning these minutes. And we're going to maybe touch on him in a few minutes. But this game last night is without Miles Bridges, who could be in your starting five or could be one of the first guys off the bench. And then Mark Williams and Nick Richards, who are your starting center and your shot blocker off the bench. With a fully healthy team, I'm starting to see this timeline be accelerated with these guys being able to take over games. I'm curious to your thoughts.
I want to save that for a little later. Um, the reason why is because when you have a duo like Melo and Brandon, you want to fill those gaps with complementary players. And I want to touch on those people before we get to the timeline because it's a great question. I have it written down in my notes too. But to truly appreciate where this team is right now, we gotta look at the connectors. And that's a
Yeah.
word we always hear Charles Lee mention, connectors, connectors, connectors. When you have Cody Martin go 3 for 4, Josh Green go 3 for 3, and they have active hands in the passing lanes. Cody Martin swatting Jaden Ivey off the backboard. Josh Green is, like starting fast breaks. It just brought me back to the introductory press conference for Charles Lee.
Yeah.
And I remember asking him this question like, hey, you came from Boston. They are notorious for launching threes. Three-point revolution is where the NBA is headed. Not even headed, it's where the NBA is. The
Yeah.
NBA is here. And I asked him, like, are you going to implement this or that playing style with this Hornets team? And his response was, it was really, it was really cerebral and self-aware. He said, of course you want to play that way, right? But if you don't have the requisite personnel to play that way, then it's stupid, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to the Pacers game when the Hornets beat the Pacers. And the reason they beat the Pacers was because, again, Miles Turner shouldn't be taking post fadeaways, right?
Yeah.
Pascal Siakam, that's kind of his game, but you shouldn't have Isaiah Jackson and these guys trying to beat down the Hornets down low. That's not their game. You're not playing to your personnel. That's a running gun team, right? But with the Hornets, I'm looking at this roster, and if you want, right now, they're second in the league only behind Boston in 3-point attempts per game. They're
Yeah.
getting them up. But when you look at the lineup, you're saying it actually fits their playing style. It fits what they're trying to do. And we went to shoot around yesterday morning before the Pistons game, asked Cody Martin about the uptick of threes he's taking and making. And he said, you know what? I learned that those are the shots I need to be comfortable with.
Yeah.
Those are the shots I have to start shooting. And when you have that personnel along with Melo and Brandon, then you can really start talking about timeline. But the bigs, because this is a big and important part too, Hunter. Like you said, Mark and Nick are out. They joined team practices again. You got the video that Hornets Twitter was eating up of Mark hitting a
Yeah.
step back three. And some of the quotes on that were absolutely hilarious. But I don't see a world how you can or where you can sit Musa when they're back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't see it because it's not just the rebounding, it's the energy that he injects into this team, the second chance points. And I get it, Mark is amazing, but what Moose is doing out there can't be overlooked.
Well, that's the thing. So you look at his box score, it's a Dennis Rodman box score. It's exactly what it is. 1 point, 1 of 3 from the field, but he's got 7 offensive rebounds, 16 total rebounds, which is his career high, and 3 steals, which is career high. I mean, his hands are in the passing lanes, his energy off the charts. He's trying to block everything. It's getting him in trouble a little bit, picking up some fouls, giving up some and ones, but that's something that takes time. This is his second career NBA start and first with the Hornets. So I completely agree with you. And this is another shout out to Walker. He asked Charles Lee, are you guys considering upgrading this contract to a regular full NBA deal? Because currently he's on a two-way. And that's whatever happens with the return of Nick Richards, the return of Mark Williams. Musa has carved out a role on this team, and I can't see him just reverting to being a Greensboro Swarm rostery, or however you want to say it. Like, I think this kind of opens the door for some trades, and we don't have to dive too much into it today, but I think he has kind of carved out that role. And while it's not a scorer, he is becoming one of the better pieces on this team. I want to get into one thing really fast. So we talked about the benching with Melo. Let's talk about the fouling a little bit. 3 fouls early. He got 3 fouls in a 3 minute span in the first quarter. A couple of them were silly fouls. He said that last night. He kind of owned up, said, I've got to take care of this. But it's affecting Charlotte. And I think it kind of played more into the comeback than him fouling out in OT and whatnot, because they're hunting him. And I want you to kind of talk us through. Obviously, Cade didn't play the OT period. But talk us through the actions that Detroit's putting Charlotte in, knowing if Melo fouls, I mean, he's got to return to the bench.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on outside. The sirens are going crazy, but like you said, it's not some of those fouls that he's committing, I'm okay with if they're in the third and fourth quarter if you have one or two fouls. If you're going to take a chance, take a risk, that's fine. In the first quarter, not all fouls are weighed the same, right? And some of those, the one that he picked up to get his third foul was just egregious. Like
Yeah,
there's no reason. And I
it's
saw
just
Charles.
frustration fouls.
That's one of the good things about being like in the arena for these games. You can see the reactions from everybody. You can see the Pistons bench and the coaching staff looking at, oh, do we review it? Do we not? All these little things, these little nuances that go into the game, you can kind of key in on. And with Melo, where remember last year when he stripped Tyrese Halliburton in Indiana to win that game?
Yep.
That's one of the fouls, or that's one of the, I guess, the steals he tried to make in the first quarter.
Hmm.
But in the first quarter, you don't do that. You do that in the fourth quarter when you have some leeway, when you have a margin of error. So I think that some of the fouls aren't bad. It's when he's committing those fouls. You can't put your team, in jeopardy like that. And like you said, because this is something I said over and over again last night. When you have four fouls or three fouls and the other team knows you're the best player, what are they going to do?
Go
LeBron
at you.
James-esque. Pick and roll. Hey, you come up here. High screen and roll. I want you guarding me. Cade was saying, LaMelo, come here every time. I'm going to go against it. Oh, wait. LaMelo switched off. Tobias post up Melo right here. And I think he did a good job near the end of the fourth defending without fouling. However, when you put yourself behind the eight ball like that, it really hurts defense because then you have to have Cody Martin and Josh Green in the game at the same time when they're usually not. Now you have to make sure Grant is able to come out and hedge that screen to make sure Melo doesn't get that pressure. All these domino effect things start happening because of that foul trouble. And I think, like you said, it's why the Pistons were able to make that comeback.
Definitely. So, just a quick note, that was the second game in a row that Charlotte hit 23s. They needed OT to do it, but to your point earlier about taking and making a ton of threes, they shot 44 last night. The Pistons actually shot 48, so took a few more. I want to talk about Charles Lee a little bit because this game could have gone left, right? I mean, we talked about the big comeback, blowing a 14-point fourth quarter lead, 20-point lead at one point in the game. And that I do want to say this 20-point leads in today's NBA mean little to nothing. But knowing that you have a team like Detroit on the road and you've got your guys going, your top two scorers are cooking, you got to be able to put this one away. So I want to talk about Charles Lee, kind of a grade on him, 15 games into the year. Obviously, we've seen some struggles, a blown lead against Brooklyn Tuesday night, another one, but they come out with the dub tonight. I want to open it up to you first. What do you think you've seen from Charles so far? Obviously early and they're missing a lot of pieces, but just an overarching 15 games into his first year.
I'm gonna give him a B minus.
Okay.
Right now, I think that in the first few games, I was baffled. I'm like, dude, you have timeouts. You know that, right? You can use some of these. When you're up 10 and they cut it back, they cut the lead down to one, or they take a 4-point lead, 14-point swing. And I'm
Yep.
saying, stop the bleeding, call a timeout. And it never came. And then we asked him in post game. And actually, when the Celtics came to town, we asked Noah Dalzell, shout out to her, Celtics beat reporter. And she was like, Missoula did the same thing in the beginning, but then he kind of got his bearings behind him. So from a timeout perspective, I was like, I'm a little iffy on that. I think it's cleaned up a little bit. I want to read something real quick. Shout out to James Plowright, who I saw this on Twitter. Tobias Harris last night talking about Charlotte's offensive system. He says, and I quote, you got to give him credit. They do a good job of throwing different lineups out there to make you either switch or try to find different mismatches. They have dynamic wings and guards. I'll watch the film on it and see the different things we could have done to help ourselves. But overall, this game came down to our defensive energy and the mistakes we made on the defensive end, I thought.
Yep.
So, Musa, right? This guy is a second chance king,
And
does
he's
everything for you,
battling with Isaiah Stewart.
battling with all these people. But like you said, when Melo's out and Brandon's out, that 5, 6 minute interval, 4 minute interval, that's the thing I think needs to be fixed. And maybe it's because Miles isn't in the lineup and he could give you offense if he was healthy. But that lineup, when I'm saying it's either Trey Mann or Cody Martin giving you offense. And I
Yeah.
don't like that. What's your take on that?
I love Trey Man's game. We've talked, I mean, I've spoke at length about that and written about that. Uh, but he's not the spark every single night. He's not your starting point guard. He's got a couple posters lately. He almost had another one last night. He tried to put someone on the rim. I think he brings like that, maybe not Jamal Crawford-esque, like 6 man type, but that type of energy, right? Like he's going to get you some buckets. He can get you some in a flurry. I don't think it's something that's sustainable though. We started looking at each other like, okay, where's Brandon at? Where's Melo at? Where are some of these sets to get your guys the ball? I think you're right. When Miles comes back, there's definitely that will unlock more and take some of that pressure off Trey because it's tough. I think in my mind, when you know you have to be the only one to go to the rim. But to Charles' grade, I want to focus on some of the close games that they've been in. In one possession games this year, they're 3-2. And knowing you have someone like a LaMelo Ball that can take over a game late, someone like a Brandon Miller that's able to make some of these shots. And I asked Brandon last night, you feel like you got Detroit's number a little bit. You got the buzzer beater now, you got the career high. And of course, he kind of shrugged it off. He had a big smile when he did it, but I think they have two guys, LaMelo and Brandon, that can get you that bucket late in the game. And you feel really good about that. I think Miles is another one that can give you that in spots. I'm going to give Charles a B. I'm in kind of the same space as you. They've got to win some of these games. I look at Philadelphia on the road in OT and at Brooklyn on Tuesday night. It's kind of those games. If you want to be a sneaky, what did Steve Clifford say 100 times last year? If we want to be a surprise team in the East, we have to win these games. And those are two of them that stand out to me the most. They battled with Boston early in the season. And they've got another game with Milwaukee coming up. I thought that win Saturday over the Bucks was huge. And we talked about this 5 game stretch right here. Last time with Jerry on, it was Milwaukee, at Cleveland, at Brooklyn, home for Detroit, and then at Milwaukee. They're 2-2 in that span. They've split it. Now they're going to Milwaukee, who, in my opinion, is playing a little bit better right now. Giannis is doing his thing. Brook is picking it up on the offensive end. Dame's giving you 25, but it's not that efficient. So I think Charlotte does have a chance to go get that dub in Milwaukee tomorrow night. But yeah, man, I'm going with the B for Charles. It's early and he doesn't have all his guys, but I think that they're making progress, especially from last season's team.
So spinning back to what you mentioned earlier with timelines, right? We talked about Melo, Brandon, dynamic. They're not even a backcourt because I guess Brandon's a three, but a dynamic duo like them. Then you pair them with connectors like Josh Green and Cody Martin. Then you have the bigs, Grant Williams, Musa Diabate. You have some bigs in waiting and Nick Richards and Mark Williams. Then you have the guys off the bench, give you offense, Trey Mann. Seth Curry's been very quiet this season. I'm hoping he can come in and have a flurry soon.
I don't even think he
But
got any run last night.
he may have gotten a few possessions,
Yeah,
but
not
it's
9 minutes. Yep.
9 minutes for Seth, but he's, not been a focal point of this team so far. But this goes back to the timeline because if you ask Jeff Peterson or you talk to him, I don't think Jeff knew Brandon was going to be this good this
Right.
early. Like they picked him number two because, of course, they thought he was going to be an all-star. But Brandon, if he keeps this up,
Well, that's the thing, man. I mean, he went number 2 in a draft where there's a literal alien. Like he's a number 1 player, number 1 pick
yeah,
in most drafts nowadays.
exactly. So when you look at that duo and you're trying to make a realistic projection of where this team can go, and of course, I just said Hornets fans are too reactive. The Hornets beat the Pistons in overtime. I
Right.
don't want to get too reactive. However, the foundation is there. The pillars are there. I think the head coach is there. Where does this team go from here? Is this a, hey, if we can keep Miles healthy and get Mark back, we're fine with where we are? Is this a team where Jeff is saying, maybe I should go and get a little frisky on the trade market? Where do you think the temperature of this team is right now? Because I love the way they're playing, and I don't know if making a big splash, I think it's way too early still for that.
So the way that I see it is Brandon Miller turns 22 today. Happy birthday, B-Mill. LaMelo Ball is 23 years old. That max contract is coming for Brandon if he continues to rise like this. I think, and I said this to you last night, I think the trade is Nick Richards. Like if you're going to make a move, you see what Musa is doing now. You know what Mark has done in the past and you expect to get back to do. As long as he doesn't come back shot chucking and taking step back three. Shout out to all the people that quoted that. That was
Hey,
hilarious.
shout out Mark because he splashed it too.
No, it was
He
nasty.
splashed it.
You
And
you
quickly,
said it.
sorry. Yeah, and quickly, people in your comments saying, "Oh my gosh, this is the one clip he got." Dude, you know how we walk in and the players are getting like one, two, three more shots up and leaving the arena or leaving the practice facility. So that's the one video Hunter was able to get of Mike Williams.
Yeah, he took two shots when we were in there and he missed the first one. So I figured I'd get the one with the make. Yeah, I think the play here is we didn't even talk about Tajon Salon and like the connector side and his game. I think as he continues to ascend with this group, he's going to be able to make some plays. We saw a little bit last night. We also saw him revert to some of the tendencies of just like find Melo, get Melo the ball.
Yeah, and a point that was missing or a part of the team that was missing was Miles as a lob threat. And we
Yeah,
saw Tijon come off the corner and catch a lob from Melo. And I think that's good too. You can start to see the flashes, right? Like Tijon, corner 3-point specialist. That's where I kind of foresee him in 2, 3 years. But if he can also make that dive to the basket and be there when the center comes up on Melo for the lob, that's another component, another dynamic that's added to this offense. You're right. And, a lot of Hornets fans are, sometimes me included, seeing Donovan Clingan be an absolute monster on defense, or they're seeing
yeah,
Dalton Connect just be an insane dude with an insane clip, insane sniper. But then you see Tijon and you're like, you know what? It wasn't a bad pick so far. So far, not at all, because the flashes are there. And this goes with the timeline thing we were talking about, where this team is young, this team is hungry. And
yeah.
although, you know, they're 6-9, this team does not like with the 49ers, we talk about how if they're 5-7, you're like, you're not really 5-7. With the Hornets, it's the opposite. They're 6-9, but I feel like this team could very easily be 500.
Yeah. No, they're there. And we talk about the timeline. Tijon, 18 years old, youngest player in the draft. When LaMelo and Brandon are hitting their primes, 27, 28, Tijon will be 23 years old. That's kind of if you're going to keep this team together, those are the building blocks that you want. I think they do have an upward trajectory. I still have them kind of in that low play-in range right now. Uh, but it is exciting to see them kind of finding ways to play together because Brandon and Melo, I mean, we've talked about it a ton, like screening for one another, getting Melo off the ball from time to time, like that is a way to take this offense to the next level. And I think the biggest takeaway I had from last night when Melo wasn't on the court and when it was Brandon's time to take over, he stepped up to the moment. Like he stepped up to the plate. They were excellent on defense. Brandon has basically a snag. You'd call it an Odell grab in the lane, blocking a alley oop, and that was a huge swing play in
Huge
OT.
swing play.
And then you've got Cody Martin pinning someone off the backboard. I think it was Ivy, maybe.
Ivy.
And then you have Trey Mann with a steal. Brandon Miller gets going, hits a kind of a fall away three with 1.2 on the shot clock, and then he hits a straightaway deep three as basically the dagger. And it's good to know that maybe his game isn't necessarily take you off the dribble, especially going left. It looked a little bit awkward at times for him. But if they can get him with the ball in his hands, he's going to make a play. And I think with Melo, yeah, they're going to win some of these games that maybe they aren't favored to. And I think that's how you get into this play in and potentially playoff race.
Yeah, a couple of things. So Brandon, I mentioned this in the game. Like think sometimes when he's going downhill, he's getting to that floater, but he's kind of leaning away from the contact and not going in, not initiating it or welcoming that contact, trying to get to the free throw line. Um, so that's one. The second thing is when you have people like Melo and Brandon, that Nets game, those guys are flamethrowers in the first quarter. Miles Bridges can't miss. Josh Green can't miss. Anyone, no one can miss. But then it goes back to can you keep the lead? Once you have the 15 points in the first quarter, can you stay consistent? The last thing I want to say, if you go back and watch the highlights, because I was doing it this morning, Gabe Plotkin sitting courtside, you can see him reacting to those Brandon Miller shots because he's right there. And I think that's the coolest part of it. How this all goes top down, trickle down stuff where Gabe and Rick's initial interest in this team, their passion for this team is why we're seeing the Hornets where they are right now because Brandon's hitting these shots and you see Gabe look like he's a season ticket holder. I,
Yeah.
I was like, Gabe looks like Steve Ballmer out there with how with the energy he was given, and that just kind of plays into the whole thing where this isn't the same Hornets team that people, the national media, are used to seeing.
Yeah. The culture, and I know it's a buzzword, but it's definitely better in the locker room. I don't think it's the same space as it was when PJ Washington went on IG Live after reaching the finals, or Terry Rozier had some stuff to say after the trade to Miami. This is a much different team. I think it really is from the top down. And I had a conversation with Gabe, just like kind of in passing before the game. And I said, think Brandon's got another one in him tonight. And he said, I don't know, man. I sure hope so. So it's funny to see kind of like the fist bump there. There's a couple pictures of that. And man, it's definitely turning around, at least at this point.
Yeah, you mentioned PJ. So before we get out of here, PJ
Hey
did tweet
PJ.
out Brandon. PJ tweeted out Brandon like Brandon, you tough boy, and Will Udy, writer for Fanside Sports Illustrated, asked Brandon that question. Said, "Hey, PJ shouted you out," and Brandon was like, "Man, I haven't checked Twitter yet, but hey, PJ." So just seeing like, I think it's just really cool again, just to close off. Like the NBA is not in a bad spot. You just got to go find the games, and I think that a
Yeah.
lot of people are missing out on that part of the association.
No doubt. If anything, last night I hope I sparked someone to print some Mello and Brandon NBA Jam shirts. And speaking of merch, I got some of our partners here. One Campus Co on got the little Charlotte zip up jacket. It's getting cold outside. It's Christmas time. Go get a gift for your loved one, man. Use the code HWY49 at onecampusco.com and get you some Niners gear. Basketball season's in full swing. We'll have Aaron Fern and some Niners talk here in the future. Hannah's covering everything Charlotte basketball right now, men's and women's. So look forward to that. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Follow some Hornets talk, and we'll be back soon.